Good morning. This morning's scripture will be read from Colossians chapter 1, verses 13 through 17. I'll be reading from the New American Standard. For he rescued us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption for the forgiveness of sins. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning. Didn't y'all feel that last song? Didn't y'all feel that? I felt that from over there. I really did. There's a stirring, and I could tell Jonathan felt that too. I mean, it was just an amazing sight to see. And the Lord is here, isn't he? And we're grateful that we have this opportunity to worship him together. This is our time where nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. We can come together as believers, and we can just relax our shoulders for a second and just lay it all at the feet of God and say, God, I was struggling, or God, I had a great week, or God, I wasn't feeling so well, but this is the moment that I can come together with my brothers and sisters and I can just lay it all there and get recharged for the day. Isn't that right? That's what Sunday is all about. We want to get recharged for what's getting ready to happen through the course of the coming week. And so this is our preparation time. And so thank you for being here for our preparation time. If you're here and you are a visitor, we want you to know that we are happy to have you here. And before you leave, fill out that card. I want to talk to you this week. Is that okay? If you're visiting, fill out that card that's right in front of you. I want to be able to talk with you this week and just kind of tell you how great it was to have you here. I may not get a chance to nudge elbows with you, but I do want to tell you that it's great to have you here. If you're visiting with us online, thank you so much for being here. Everybody else in the world moved hours except us. And I can't tell you how excited I am about that. I'm telling you, I can't get with the going forward for so long, the going backwards for so long. Can we just stay still? That's one of the biggest reasons why we moved here. I just stay still. Among other reasons. I'm just joking. I'm joking. But it's good to have you guys here today, and it's good to be around good people. Yesterday, I promised myself I wouldn't do this, but I did it. I'm doing it anyway. Yesterday, my wife and I, we had our anniversary, man, and it was an amazing thing. I appreciate that. It was an amazing thing, and it's interesting because I told her, I said, I ain't never been with nobody this long. And she said, well, I haven't either. I said, well, we are in uncharted waters now, So, but we're just, man, we're grateful that the Lord has allowed us to see a decade together. And I know that's not a long time to a lot of y'all in here, but that's a long time to me. I'm just 34. I mean, I know. You're saying, Jeremy, you don't look 34. You look like you're 21 or you look like you're 18. Thank you. I appreciate that. But no, I am 34 with grays now, and I don't like it. So if you have a good recipe for just for men, let me know. All right. So here we go. I'm sorry. I'm acting up. It's 11:10. Here we go. Colossians chapter 1. Colossians chapter 1. We started this last week, and I want to give you the sermon in 30 seconds from last week. Number one, this is the biggest takeaway that everybody should have walked out of here with, is 3 words: God rescued us. Man, that feels good. God rescued us. And what did he rescue us from? He rescued us from sin. And so what that suggests is that God rescued you from you. Nobody else, you. So that means that we should have a great appreciation about God, because he saw that we had a problem, and he said, instead of making them figure it out, I'm going to provide them a way out. So God rescued us. Number 2, God chose to, by sinful man, back by offering his son for our exchange. So he says that they are worth it, that I'm willing to give Jesus for them. I don't know about you today, but I know that I am not as perfect as the Son of Man is. I'm not as perfect as the Son of God is, but I'm grateful that he was willing to see something in me to say he's worth it. Number 3, it is through Jesus that we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. There is nothing else. It's just through Jesus. There isn't some secret. There isn't something that you have to recognize and know and be able to quote. There is no documentation that you got to put. It's just Jesus who gives us our forgiveness of sins. And then number 4, once you understand that it is through Jesus that you have redemption, you have forgiveness of sins, and you have been rescued, then Jesus calls us to a relationship with him. A lifelong relationship with him, because relationship with God is the most important thing that you can ever do in your life. So, verse 15. Paul now addresses the false teachings in the church of Colossae. And not necessarily in the church of Colossae, but some of the false teachings that Colossae had been hearing. And so Paul says, instead of me coming there, let me just address the problem. Verse 15, he decides at verse 15, I'm going to refute some claims that the false teachers have, and he starts it in verse 15. Here's the false claim. The false teachers were suggesting that matter is evil. And for that reason, God would not have come to earth as a true human being in bodily form. They said there's no way, because God cannot interact himself with evil. And so therefore, Jesus could have never showed up, because if he did, then that would make Jesus evil. Paul says, no, that's actually not the case. Paul says Christ is the image, verse 15, the image of God, the exact likeness of him, because he is God, yet he died on the cross as a human being. So Paul says, let me help you understand the deity of Jesus. He is both God and he is man. So this is not impossible, as you would suggest, but quite frankly, this is just how it was. So think about this. Paul says Jesus is not only equal to God, but he is God. That's what the text tells you. He told the same thing to the Philippian church in Philippians chapter 2, in verse number 6. He says, even though he was God, he thought being equal to God is something that didn't need to be grasped. He says, I am that. I can put this aside even for a moment to save the people, because I am God. I can pick this back up again. So Jesus is not only equal to God, but Paul says he is God. The verb tense that's used is in the perfect tense, which would suggest that the position of Jesus, of him being God, is both now and forever. What does that tell you? Jesus is never going to stop being God. That should make you feel good. Because if nothing else, you know that God came and dwelled in bodily form. He understands the struggles that you have. He understands the things that you deal with. He understands the things that you see, and you have God sitting next to God being an advocate for you and me. Think about that. It's one thing to have an advocate in somebody who understands you. It's another thing in having an advocate in somebody who understands you but sits right next to the Father. Think about that. We have advocates, we have advocate organizations all over this country, all over the world. But one of the things that those advocate organizations don't have is that they don't have a seat next to God. So think about this. Paul says that Jesus is the visible expression of the Father. Jesus says, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. Jesus says that if you want to know what the Father looks like, if you want to know how the Father functions, just look at me. And me and the Father are one. And so Jesus says, look, I am he. Paul says he is the visible expression of who the Father is. And so Jesus not only reflects God, but as God, he reveals God to us. That's amazing. It's an amazing thing for Jesus to be God, reflect God, but reveal God. And if you know anything about Jesus, you know the same of the Father. Because remember, they function as one. And so the text in verse 15 tells you that he is not only the image of God, but he is the firstborn of all creation. That suggests that he has priority and authority of the firstborn princeship. What does that mean? That means that Jesus is supreme over all creation, including the spirit world. Think about what I just said. He has priority and authority, and he is supreme. So if someone is worth worshiping, they have to have priority, they have to have authority, and they have to be supreme. If they cannot line up to those three, then they are not worth worship. If you want to know what I'm doing here, I'm actually making the case that Jesus alone is the only answer. Think about what I'm saying to you. I'm saying Jesus alone is the only answer because he has the priority, he has the authority, he has the supremeship, he has the power, and everything is subject to Jesus Christ. So think about it. That's verse 15. He's the image of God. He's the firstborn of all creation, meaning that everything answers to him. Verse 16 then, verse 16 then takes you down the path that tells you that all things created and exist for him. How do you know? Because Paul, the claim that he uses or that he's refuting is that the false teachers thought that God did not create the world because he would not have created evil. God couldn't have created this thing because God can't create evil. And so therefore, there is no way possible that God was involved with this. Paul says, well, absolutely, that's not correct. Because what Paul declares is that Jesus Christ, as God in the flesh, took part and had a very hand in the creation of the universe. Let me show you how. Paul explains that the purpose of creation has a couple of key terms in verse 16. Number one, it was created in. Number two, it was created through. And number three, it was created for. So what does that tell you? It tells you that the creation it happened within the Godhead. Christ was there. It was created through Jesus. It was created for Jesus. John even said it best in John chapter 1 in verse number 3. He says, all things were made through him. Without him, nothing was made that was made. Remember, if you go back up, he says in John 1, in the beginning was the what? The Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. Verse number 3, he says, all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. So created in him, through him, for him. Talking about the person of Jesus. So think about this. The false teachers reasoned that if Christ was God, there was no way that he could have created the universe. And so the only thing that he had created and the only thing that he would be in charge of would be the spirit world. That's the only thing. That's the only thing that made sense to them, that if he's going to be in charge of anything, it's going to be the spirit world. The spirit world. Well, Paul then reasons that all thrones, this is verse 16, all thrones, all dominion, all principalities, all powers in heaven and on earth, both visible and invisible, are under the authority of Jesus Christ. Think about that. There is nothing that is not subjected to Jesus Christ. So think about this. You in here today serve a God that even demons know better to test. Think about that. The God that you serve is so great that even the enemy knows they don't have nothing on him, so that's why they bother you. Oh yeah, you'll get it when you go home. They can't do anything with God. They understand that. The enemy understands there's nothing that I can do with God, and so let me bother the people of God. But when the people of God realize who they serve, the enemy ought not bother you either. Think about that. I serve a God who is greater than any power. I serve a God who is greater than any principality. I serve a God who has dominion over everything. I serve a God whose throne is bigger than any throne. He says anything that's visible, invisible, anything in heaven, anything on earth, I'm greater than that. And you serve that God. Think about that. You serve a God that fear has no hold on. And if that be the case, the only thing that is missing then from the child of God is the focused confidence that God can do any, because we say it all the time, right? With God, all things are possible. But you know what? Our focus, our faith, and our function have to believe that as well. The focus has to be there that anything is possible with God. The faith has to be there that anything is possible with God. The function, I have to even live my life like God can do anything. Think about it. It's not suggesting that God is going to do everything, but it suggests that he is great and powerful to do anything. And so that's what Paul's trying to teach here in verse 16. He's trying to show us that there can be nothing that arises in your life that can be too big for God. Nothing is too big for God. Let me give it to you another way. There is nothing in your life that can arise that is too hard for God. All you got to do is just talk to him. I'm not suggesting that God is going to give you exactly what you ask him for, but I guarantee you that God is at work even before you talk to him. And when you talk to him, sometimes it's not the fact that you're talking to him for him to act. Sometimes it's talking to him so that you can relieve yourself of the pressure of figuring it out. Because there are things in your life that you're never going to figure out. Think about this. There are things right now that you need to be saying, that's above my pay grade. I ain't got nothing to do with that. I'm sorry, that's not a me thing. That's a God thing. I can't deal with that. Can't give you no answer. I can go to God for you. But there's just certain things that we can't handle, and it's supposed to be that way. Why, Jeremy? So that we can have a complete dependence on the God who has power and control over everything. All right? So here it is, verse 17. Verse 17. I love verse 17. Because in 4 words, this is your summary of verse 17. He holds everything together. Now, somebody going to walk out of here and say, now, what is inclusive of everything? Okay. Let me help you. Everything is everything. Did I help? I think I helped you. All right, watch this. Paul uses this opportunity again to teach Jesus and refute two more claims. Y'all ready? The first claim, they shared, the false teachers, that Christ was not God's unique son, but rather one of many intermediaries between God and humanity. They miss where Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except by, they missed that. So that's why they said, there's just so many ways to get to God. And I think many of you all probably still hear that today. There's so many ways to get to God. But Paul says that Christ existed before anything else and is the firstborn of those resurrected, meaning that the only way to get to God is through the firstborn of those resurrected. That's the only way to get there. So Paul actually affirms and confirms Jesus' claim where Jesus says, I am the way. Paul says he is the way. Y'all see that? Here's the second claim. The second claim is that they wouldn't accept Jesus as Christ, as the way to be saved. Instead, they insisted that people could only find God by knowing special secret things. Paul says, let me make something clear. Salvation comes only through Christ. That's it. I don't care whatever you learn. Salvation only through Christ. So here it is. Let me show you why, and then we're done. Jesus is before all things. We understand that. In time and in rank. So that means that before time, Jesus was there. And I understand that sometimes the eternal is something that's hard to be grasped by our finite minds. I get that. But one of the things that faith does is that when my mind can't understand it, faith allows me to keep going with it. Jesus is before all time and before anybody. Does that make sense? How do we know this? Because at the end of the day, again, the verb tense that's used is the perfect tense, which suggests now and forever. So what are you saying, Jeremy? He is not only the creator of the world before time, but because he has rank, he functions as the sustainer of the world. So think about that. He says, I created it, but not only did I create it, but I created it with a function to sustain it. So whenever you become a child of God, whenever you have a relationship with Jesus, the one thing that's super important for you to understand is that not only did he create the world, not only did he want to start the relationship, but Jesus is going to sustain the relationship. That's what he does. He's a sustainer. So here's our first Mesa moment. The first Mesa moment is this. He made everything happen, but guess what? He keeps making everything happen. That's what he does. Jesus says, I never stop making stuff happen. I am. So in essence, if you remember the phrase that Moses asked God, he says, look, when I go to Pharaoh, who do I tell Pharaoh that sent me to you? He said, tell him I am that I am has sent you. And I'm sitting here reading that and I'm studying that, thinking, what does that even mean? God says, whatever he needs me to be, tell him I am. So think about this, Mesa moment. Whatever God is doing, God is making stuff happen because he is the great I am. Whatever that looks like in your life, he's making it happen. There's nothing that you do in your life that you do on your own. But God makes it happen because he says, my job is to sustain you. That's the first Mesa moment. Back to back. Here we go. Here's the second one. Everything is held together. It's safe and kept from falling apart into chaos because of him. Let me tell you, without God, you may not know this, but your life is in chaos. But a lot of times, we've lived in chaos for so long that we've just learned how to function in it. And we have then made us functioning in chaos to be something that's normal. Let me tell you, chaos is not normal. It's not normal. Living a life that's a roller coaster is not normal. Because in Christ, he knows how to make peace with everything. How do you know that, Jeremy? Because he holds everything together. It doesn't suggest that life won't be hard, but it doesn't suggest that just because life is hard, that you got to be chaotic with life. No, sometimes you got to go to God and tell God what's going on as if he don't know what's happening, and then say, God, if it don't calm down, give me peace. Give me peace. If it doesn't go the way I want it to go, God, just give me a cool spirit. Give me a cool spirit. Some of y'all in here today, some of you all in here, and y'all is a Texas term, all right? So just, if I say it, don't get offended by it. So some of y'all in here right now understand that the only way you got to this point is that God gave you peace to keep walking in an unsettling circumstance. Let me tell you, that is one of the most calming feelings that you can have, to know that God is at work and you can go to bed at night. What are you, I tell Tam this all the time, what we gonna stay up for? I'm just saying, what are we gonna do? You know, we gonna stay up all night, we gonna think about it, and then when the sun come up at 5:15 out here in Arizona, we're gonna be looking like zombies because our eyes gonna be red, body gonna be slouched over. There's nothing that you can do at 3 a.m. in the morning. When you remember the 4 words, he holds everything together, guess what you can do? Go to bed. Somebody needs to hear that today. Go to bed. Go to bed. He holds it together. Go to sleep. He is God. Go to sleep. Ain't no point of praying about it and then staying up all night. Go to sleep. Go to bed. It's going to be all right. Because guess what? The same thing that you stayed up for is going to be the same when you wake up in the morning. You may as well just get some sleep anyway. I'm telling you. So listen to me. He holds it together. He holds it together. If you're here today and you're not a Christian, you don't have that relationship with God, let me tell you, he holds it together. And he's ready to take you and take himself and put you together back where you belong and hold you and never let you go. I've never heard God say, I'm going to let you go. No, God will never let you. The only reason why people walk away from God, it's not because God unlinked. It's because you decided, God, let me walk away. But let me tell you, we serve a great God who's willing to even stay right there to say, okay, I'm ready whenever you're ready. I'm ready whenever you're ready. You're not a child of God today? Let's link with God. Let's link with God. Because he's going to hold you together. You do that by understanding that Jesus is the Son of God. We've proven that today. Are you willing to link with him and confess that Jesus is that? Go down in water to start over. That's what baptism is. It's a start over. To where nothing else before that start over matters anymore. If you're here today and you say, you know what, I am a child of God, Jeremy, but sometimes I unlink from time to time. Let me tell you something. God says, let me hold you together. The struggle of life ain't really the struggle anymore if you just stay linked to him. Will you come? We're going to sing a song of encouragement. We're going to sing a song of encouragement. This is your opportunity. Will you come? Stand to your feet.